Hey everyone, today we're going to be talking about purposeful annotation, making your reading stronger. Now before we get started, I know that annotation is a word that some of you may not have heard. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to talk with your partner or as a class about what you think annotation means. Teachers, this is a great time to pause the presentation and talk with your class. At Lively, when we say annotation, we mean adding notes to a text to help build your understanding. This is something you may have done in your classes when your teacher asks you to prove an answer to a question that she asks. Now, to help us understand why this is so important, I'm going to tell you guys a little story about Hansel and Gretel. Now, Hansel and Gretel were a brother and sister who lived in the woods with their father and their stepmother. Now, like in most fairy tales, the stepmother is not a very nice person, and she convinces their dad to take Hansel and Gretel out into the woods and leave them there so they can't find their way home. But Hansel is too smart for that. Hansel decides to leave breadcrumbs along the path to help him and his sister find their way home. And it works. After they're left in the forest, they follow the breadcrumbs all the way back to their parents' house, where they find their stepmother very unhappy, but their father happy to see them. Your notes are the breadcrumbs you use to remind yourself about what you read and to find the answers to questions. You can look at this example over on the side and you can see that the person who annotated this text did a great job of modeling their thinking, and if they had to answer a question about it, they'd be able to easily find it. So, what is this going to look like for you? Step 1 is you're going to preview the text. That means you're going to look at the text before you read. The first thing you're going to do is look at the title, and if it's an article, you're going to circle it. What do you think the text is going to be about based on that title? Then take a walk through the text. What other titles or subtitles do you see? Circle them. What do the pictures show you? Look at the captions for clues and record any thoughts you might have about them. Are there any maps, graphs, or charts? Why is the information in them important to the book or to the article? Circle any important information. Find and circle any bold words. Do you know what they mean? How can you find out? And then make predictions. I think this text will be about. I wonder. I want to read more about this. We're going to start off by modeling this using an article called Western Roundup. Okay? As you can see, it's got lots of text features. It's got pictures. It's got subtitles. It's got captions and charts and graphs, all the kinds of things that we like to see in our text. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to circle that title, Western Roundup. And then over here beside it, I'm going to write the word horses because based on the pictures, I think we're rounding up horses in this article. The next thing I'm going to do is circle the subheadings or the subtitles. Home on the range. Now, I'm not sure what range means, but since it says home on the range, and the article I think is about horses, I'm going to assume that this is where horses live. Now, let's look at the other caption, the picture. It says government wranglers catch a wild horse in Nevada last month. What is a wrangler? Looking at the picture, I'm going to guess that a wrangler is somebody who catches horses because I can see that they've got a rope around this horse and he looks like he's trying to get away. On this one, you can see that the horses are acting kind of wild, and it says these horses may be adopted and tamed. And then our last text feature is a map. Now, it's not just any map. This map shows me the western states with wild horses. So I can see, does Texas have wild horses? No, because it's not labeled. We've got all these other states here that have wild horses, and that's important information to the article. So you can see that after I have previewed my text, this is what it's going to look like. Circles, writing, and now I'm going to think about it. I think this text is going to be about catching wild horses based on the pictures, based on the headings, and based on the other things that I've seen. Now you're going to try it with a book, okay? Your teacher will pause the video, and you're going to do a walk through a book as a class using the steps below to guide you. They're the same steps that we use with an article. They're just going to look a little bit different with a book because we're not going to be able to circle things with a pencil, but we can still acknowledge the importance of the different features. Teachers, go ahead and pause now and do this activity with your class. Welcome back. Today we're going to be following the next steps 2 through 5 while reading the text. Step 2 is underlining unfamiliar words. That means words that I don't know the meaning of. Why do we underline unfamiliar words? To remind us to go back and figure out the meaning. I may not know it when I first see it, but after I've read a little bit more of the story and I go back, I might be able to use clues to help me figure it out. In my article, Western Roundup, I've gone ahead and read, and I've underlined 2 words that I wasn't sure about. The first one was roamed, and the second one was graze. Now that I've read the whole article, I can go back and I can use some clues from the text to help me figure this out. It says, the horses have roamed this land for centuries. Now the sentence before it says, wild horses run free. And we're talking about where horses live. So when I say roamed, I think it's probably them running free in a place where they live. The other word, graze. It says, also ranchers need open areas for to graze cattle. They say that the horses compete with cattle for food and water. Okay, well if the horses are competing and with the cattle and they need to graze for food and water, I'm assuming graze means something to do with food and water. So that's going to help me figure out the meanings of those words, and then I can use those to help me understand the text a little bit better. Now we're going to do the same thing we did before, and we're going to try it with a book in our class, okay? Now with a book, you're again not going to be able to underline those unfamiliar words, but you can underline them with your finger as you go through and then use the sentences around the words to help you find the meaning. Use your context clues. Teachers, go ahead and pause and read your book with your class. Step 3 is paraphrasing the paragraphs. And all that means is writing a few words next to each paragraph to remind you of what's in it. Why do we do this? To help find our way back to the information that we need. It's just like a map. It's going to help you go back and find your way to the treasure, which is the answer to your questions. Now you're going to do this in 5 words or less. So you can see, for my Western Roundup, I've kept it simple. The first paragraph is about history and some disagree with adoption. The second paragraph is about fighting to keep horses free. The third paragraph is reasons the population is out of control. And then the last paragraph is another idea to help. So you can see I never went above 5 words, but I got the main idea of those paragraphs and put it in there. You're going to do this exact same thing with your book. Your teacher is going to read one section to you, and then you're going to come up with the keywords to help you remember what it's mostly about. Now remember, your class has to do this and keep it at 5 words or less. Teachers, go ahead and pause now and continue after you've finished reading. All right, step 4 is to box the parts of a summary. Now, you guys know that a summary is different depending on whether you're reading a fiction or a nonfiction text. In fiction, your summary is going to include the characters, the setting, the problem, solution, and the beginning, middle, and end of the story. In a nonfiction text, you're going to include the main idea, the supporting details for that main idea, and you're going to do it in a beginning, middle, and end format. In Western Roundup, I went through and I boxed the important parts. Wild horses are important because they're what the story is mostly about. Running out of food and space, that's my problem. And then my different solutions, putting horses up for adoption, and then people fighting the plan. And you can see that this goes on. I've boxed all the things that are important pieces and important to the main idea of the story. Now you're going to do the same thing with a book with your class. You're going to read the story and then find the parts of the summary in your book and record them on the board or in a sheet of paper since you can't box them. try using those to create a good summary after you're done and see if this activity works. Teachers, go ahead and pause now and read the book with your class. Step 5. Underline and number information that helps answer questions. This is where your test-taking strategies come in. The rest of the steps we can do anytime we're reading. This one is going to come directly if you have been asked a question. Why should you go back and underline your answers? You should always double check. Everyone makes mistakes. Improving your answers helps prevent that from happening to you. I know that I have been answering questions on an online quiz or something like that, and I've clicked so quickly without reading the answers or going back that I've clicked the wrong answer even though I know the right one. And this would stop me from doing that. Alright, so the question I was answering was, what factors affect the size of the horse population? Now, remember when I went back and I did those paraphrases? I wrote population right here next to paragraph 3. That made it easy for me to go back and find where I needed to go in the story. So you can see that I underlined as a factor that affects the size of the horse population, that they don't have many natural predators, and that there isn't enough food for a huge herd. And I went ahead and wrote number 1 here and circled it so that I know that that's question number 1. And this just helps me prove that I found the correct answer, because it's easy to say something and not remember exactly the way it was supposed to go. Now, you're going to try it with your book. Your teacher's going to read you a book. She's going to ask you a question about what you've been reading, and you need to think about where you should go back in the book to find the answer to that question. And that's the end of our activity. So teachers, go ahead and do this with your class, and you've finished our annotating lesson.